This is the first video in a series where we are going to be looking at building this component. This component has two states. One of it is where I display a grid of items, and the other one is a list of items. And then we have some static component pieces like this toolbar, and also then this resize button. So the whole point of building this component is to use the CRX technologies. That would be the binding engine, process API, stuff like that. But it's also going to have some fundamental CSS and HTML examples for us to follow. So let's get started. You can see here I've got a folder structure. This is just my layout view. For convenience sake, I'm adding the component in the same folder as the layout view, but technically it should be in the components folder. So I've got my component, JavaScript and HTML, my layout, JavaScript and HTML, and then some other files that I need to be able to do the job, which is SVGs used within the component itself. On the component, I just put in the base infrastructure here as you would do for a normal component, but in this case, we actually want to make this a bindable element. So before you continue with this series, you really need to go and have a look at the binding engine videos because you're going to need it here. But let's turn this into a bindable element and start with the fundamental layout. To start with, on the mycollection.html, we add an h2 that just says hello world. We just want to make sure that the component renders correctly from the beginning. We have changed this from HTML element to CRS binding classes bindable element, and then we've provided a read-only HTML property that tells us which HTML file to load. The rest is pretty much the same. Here you can see that we're using the component in the view, and then we are also importing it in our view models JavaScript file. Going to the browser, we can see that we have our Hello World component showing, and we know that all of our basic stuff has been set up so that we can now start developing the component further. The important part here is to note that I'm doing very few steps, but ensuring that each step is actually correct. So I'm not trying to go too far with the component. Make sure that you do your work in small bits and then check the small bits every step of the way. And so as part of this series, you'll see us going through the pieces little bit by little bit as we go along, checking that each bit that we're doing is actually correct. There's no point in running ahead when the step that you're on isn't functioning correctly.